You know that moment when you open your community dashboard and realize someone's gone quiet? They used to show up, they used to comment. Maybe they were one of your more active members, one of those people who made the space feel alive just by being in it. And now, nothing. Or worse, you get the cancellation email and you spend the next 20 minutes staring at your screen, trying to piece together what you did wrong. And here's what happens next. If you're anything like most community builders I know, you spiral. You convince yourself it means something's definitive, that your content isn't good enough, that the community is falling apart, that you should restructure everything, rebrand, maybe just shut it all down and start over with a different model. Maybe memberships don't work. Maybe you were never actually cut out for this. That is a lot of conclusion to draw from one person going quiet. I had a community builder tell me recently that she completely overhauled her entire community structure after 3 cancellations in 1 month. New spaces, new content plan, new onboarding. She essentially rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. And here's the part that stuck with me. She didn't actually know what had caused those 3 cancellations. She just reacted. And the 4 months she spent rebuilding everything that wasn't necessarily broken, those are 4 months she didn't get back. Today, I want to talk about what to actually do when members ghost and how to read the patterns in your churn without losing your mind in the process. Hi, friends. I'm Rachel, and today we're talking about the retention audit. What I want to look for when members ghost, 5 things to check before you spiral, and how to figure out whether you're dealing with a content problem, a structure problem, or just the reality that not every member is the right member. Let's get into it. So, first, let's name what's actually happening when members go quiet. The instinct is to take it personal. And I understand that deeply. You built this thing, you care about it. Every cancellation can feel like a vote of no confidence. Every silent member can feel like someone who showed up to your party and is just standing in the corner wishing they hadn't come. But here's what I want you to sit with before you do anything else. Ghosting is data, it's not a verdict. When someone goes quiet or cancels, that is information about something. It might be about them. It might be about you. It might be about the timing of their life, the clarity of your onboarding, the structure of your community, the content you've been making, or the fit between who they are and what you've built. The whole key is figuring out which one it is. And you can do that if you audit instead of spiral. Here's the real difference between the two. Spiraling decides it already knows the answer. And the answer is that something is very wrong. Spiraling looks like 3 cancellations in a month and concludes the whole thing is broken. Spiraling is loud and fast, and it leads to sweeping changes made from anxiety, not from clarity. And changes made from anxiety almost never solve the actual problem. Auditing asks what's actually happening. It looks at patterns across time, not at individual data points in isolation. Auditing is quieter and more curious and a little bit methodical. And auditing is almost always the more useful response. So today I'm giving you a 5-part retention audit. 5 things to check when you notice members ghosting or churn ticking up. Not so you can fix everything at once, but so you can identify what is actually worth your attention. I'll tell you right now, in my experience, retention issues almost always come back to one of 3 root causes. And I'm gonna walk you through that at the end so you can take this framework and actually use it. Audit point 1, your onboarding. I come back to this one more than almost anything else. When a community builder tells me retention is struggling, not because content doesn't matter, not because structure is irrelevant, but because in my experience, most ghosting starts in the first 30 days. And it starts not because the community is bad, but because of a gap in the onboarding experience. Here's a scenario I see constantly. Someone joins with real excitement. They're in. They paid. They've been following your work for a while and they finally made the decision to say yes. And then they log in and they're not quite sure what to do. Maybe there's 6 or 7 spaces and they don't know which one to start in. Maybe there's a welcome post, but no real sense of what the rhythm of the community looks like. When things happen, what belongs where, how to actually plug in as a new person. Maybe they feel like they walked into a room where everyone else already knows each other and nobody handed them a drink or explained how the room works. And they don't say anything because they don't want to look confused, because they're busy, because they think they'll come back when they have more time. And then they never really come back. That's not a content problem. That's not a fit problem. That is an onboarding problem. And it is one of the most fixable things on this list because it's structural. You can change it, test it, and see the results relatively quickly. So when you're doing your retention audit, look at the first 30 days with genuinely fresh eyes. What is the actual experience of being a brand new member? What does someone see when they log in for the very first time? What is the one thing you want them to do first? And is that unmistakably, obviously clear? If you can't answer that last question immediately, start there. The goal isn't a complicated onboarding sequence. The goal is clarity. Give new members one clear next step and make it hard to miss. Audit point 2, your content. Content is usually the first thing people blame when retention dips. Maybe my content isn't good enough, but what I actually see more often is something more specific than that. It's not the quality of the content, it's the relevance. The question isn't, is this good content? The question is this the right content for the people who are actually in the room with you right now? Membership communities shift over time. The people who join in your first year might have different needs than the people who join in year 2 or 3. The content that created excitement at launch might not be what sustains engagement 18 months later. The conversations your community was built to have might have naturally evolved. And if your content hasn't kept pace, members feel that gap, even when they can't quite name it. Here's what I want you to look at. Look at what content is generating real engagement and what's falling flat. Look at what questions members are actually bringing to the community and whether your content is answering them. And then ask yourself honestly, is there a gap between what you're creating and what your members are hungry for right now? Sometimes the answer is simple. You get a little too into your own head and started making content more about what interests you than what serves them. It happens to everyone, but it's fixable. Sometimes the answer is harder. The community has matured and the content needs to mature with it. Members who've been around for 2 years don't need the same foundational material they needed when they first joined. If you're still delivering entry-level content to people who are well past that stage, they're going to get bored. And board members ghost quietly before they cancel loudly. The audit question here is simple. Does what I'm creating still match where my members actually are? Audit point 3, your structure. This one's underrated, and I believe it quietly causes more churn than most community builders realize, precisely because it's invisible from the inside. Nobody sends you a cancellation message that says, I left because your community was hard to navigate. They just leave, and you never find out why. Structure is how people move through your community. It's the spaces you've created, how they're named, what belongs where, and how easy is it for a member to find what they're looking for and know where to put what they want to share. The thing about structure is that it becomes completely invisible to you once you've been living inside it for a while. You built it, you understand the logic, you know exactly where everything lives. It makes perfect sense to you. Your members do not have the same mental map. They're navigating it fresh, sometimes weeks after they last logged in. If someone has to work to figure out where to post something or has to click through multiple spaces to find a resource they vaguely remember seeing somewhere, they're spending cognitive energy they didn't plan to spend when they join. And that friction accumulates. It doesn't usually create a dynamic exit. It creates a quiet drift, a gradual decrease in logins, a slow disengagement until one day they realize they haven't actually been in there in 2 months and they cancel without a second thought. So here's the audit exercise I want you to try. Go into your community and pretend you joined 6 days ago. You're past the brand new phase, but You're not a power user. Try to find a piece of content you shared 3 months ago. Try to figure out where you posted a question about something specific. Try to follow one thread from beginning to current. How did that feel? If it felt a little clunky, even slightly, that is important information. Because if it feels clunky to you who built the thing, it almost certainly feels more clunky to the person who didn't. The solution here is almost always simplification. Fewer spaces, not more. Cleaner, more intuitive names. Clear starting points for new members. Structure doesn't need to be elaborate to be effective. It needs to be clear. Audit point 4, your presence. This one requires some honest self reflection. So I'm just going to say it plainly. Have you gone a little quiet in your own community? When retention dips, we almost always look outward. We look at what members are or aren't doing. What could we do to re engage them? What programming might bring energy back into the space? But sometimes the most important question is more uncomfortable. Have I been showing up consistently? Members notice when the host goes quiet, and what they tell themselves about it isn't usually she must be really busy. What they tell themselves is, I'm not sure this is still a priority for her. They start to wonder whether the community is still active, whether the energy shift they're feeling is temporary or something more permanent, whether this is still a space worth investing their time and money in. Your presence as the community leader does not have to mean posting every single day. It doesn't mean performing energy you don't have, but it does mean showing up with enough consistency that members feel the lights are on, that there's someone at the helm who cares about this space and the people in it. If you've had a hard few months and your presence has quietly slipped, that could be contributing to what you're seeing in your numbers. Not because you did something wrong, because leadership presence is a retention factor, whether you like to acknowledge it or not. This isn't about guilt, it's just honest data worth including in the audit. Audit point 5, member fit. This last one might be the most revealing thing I say today. Not everyone who joins your community is the right fit for it. And that is not a failure. It is the simple reality of running any offer at any scale. Sometimes people join in an enthusiastic moment that doesn't accurately reflect where they actually are in their business. Sometimes they join because someone they trust recommended it, but the community turns out to be a slightly different fit than they expected. Sometimes the version of the community they imagined when they signed up doesn't quite match the community they found when they got inside. And those people churn. And honestly, they should. Because a community that tries to hold on to every member, regardless of fit, slowly becomes a community that's for nobody in particular. That attempt to retain everyone dilutes the culture, the quality of conversations, and eventually members who genuinely belong there. What matters for your audit is this. The question is not just why are people leaving? The question is who is leaving. If the people churning tend to be newer and earlier in their business, and your community was built for more established founders, that is a fit problem. The solution is clear messaging upstream, not a redesign of your entire community. Make it more obvious before someone joins who this is actually built for and what stage they need to be at to get real value from it. If the people churning are more tenured members, your most engaged contributors, the people you thought of as your community's backbone, that is a fundamentally different signal. And it warrants a much more honest conversation with yourself and what has shifted and why. Look at who is leaving, not just how many people are leaving. The pattern in that data is almost always more instructive than the raw number. Okay, you've done that audit. You've looked at your onboarding, your content, your structure, your presence, and your member fit. Here's how to use what you found. In my experience, most retention issues come back to one of 3 root causes: a content problem, a structure problem, or a people problem. A content problem looks like this. Members join with a certain expectation about what they get, and what they're actually receiving doesn't match anymore. The level is off. The topics have drifted. The content stopped evolving with the community. The fix is listening, actually listening. to what members are asking for and building deliberately towards that. Watch what sparks real conversation. Watch what lands flat. Your members will usually tell you exactly what they need if you're paying attention. A structure problem looks like this. Members are present in the community but not engaging. Not because they don't want to, but because the path to engagement is unclear. They don't know where to post. They can't find what they're looking for. The community has accumulated layers over time, and it now feels more like a maze than a home. The fix is simplification. Almost always the answer is fewer spaces, clearer naming, and clearer entry points for people still finding their footing. A people problem looks like this. The churn is concentrated to a particular segment of your membership. And when you look closely at who those people are, you can see that the community was never quite the right fit for them to begin with. The fix is upstream. Better messaging before they join, clearer positioning about who this is for and who it isn't. So the people who say yes are the people who actually belong. Here's what I want you to walk away with today. When your members ghost, the worst thing you can do is panic and make sweeping changes without understanding what's actually driving the pattern. The second worst thing is to do nothing at all and hope it corrects itself. The most useful thing you can do is get calm and get curious. Audit instead of react. Look at your onboarding, look at your content, look at your structure, look at your own presence. Look at who's leaving and not just how many. And then pick the one or two things that seem most connected to what you're seeing and address those with intention. Not everything at once, not a total rebuild, just honest, targeted attention pointed at the actual problem. Here's the reframe I want to leave you with. Your retention rate is not a report card, it's a conversation your community is trying to have with you. The members who ghost, the ones who cancel quietly, the ones who stop engaging, they're not passing judgment, they're pointing at something. And if you can learn to get curious about what that something is, instead of spiraling into what it might mean, you will make better decisions and build something more sustainable in the long run. Retention is not a mystery, it is feedback. And when you learn to read it instead of react to it, the whole thing gets a lot clearer and a lot more manageable. If you're in the middle of this right now and want to be thinking through it alongside people who've been in it, Co-Creator Society is a good place to be. We talk about exactly this kind of thing, the real, unglamorous, important stuff that actually moves the needle in a membership. You can find us at cocreatorsociety.com. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, bye, friends.